You cannot even imagine how far people's cruelty and baseness can go. An example of this is this person, who skillfully concealed the fact of a murder. At his wife's funeral, he behaved like a grieving person, having successfully deceived all those present. None of those present even suspected what she was capable of in reality. The character of our story today is a girl with a tragic destiny named Alexia Fouillot, who was born on February 18, 1988 in Gré-la-Ville, a small but picturesque village in France. Her family consisted of her mother, Isabelle, who held the position of municipal councillor, and her father, Jean-Pierre, owner of a family cafe with his wife. In the family circle, there was also her older sister, Stephanie. In 2004, she managed to finish secondary school at the age of 16, and after that, she immediately entered university. During this same time, Alexia met Jonathan Daval, a boy 4 years older than her. This encounter turned into a deep feeling, and they quickly began dating. For both, it was the first serious romantic experience, filled with tenderness and emotion of first love. Jonathan Daval was born on February 16, 1984. After the tragic loss of his father from a heart attack at the age of 13, he grew up in a large family with 4 brothers, 2 sisters, and his mother, Martine Gadry, who took care of the family by working as a nanny. Jonathan stood out as a talented student. He managed to finish school and obtained an education in computer science. His career began in a company specializing in computer consulting and technical maintenance. In addition to work, Jonathan found his passion in football, combining it with his professional activity. His acquaintances described him as a modest person, a bit shy but extremely friendly, and his employers valued him for his ability to communicate with clients. On July 18, 2015, Alexia and Jonathan got married. Immediately after the celebration, they went on a trip to the Pacific Islands as a honeymoon. Upon their return home, they settled in the house that previously belonged to Alexia's grandparents. This house was adapted to their preferences and style. Jonathan appreciated the trust and respect of Alexia's parents. They saw him as the ideal son-in-law that every family would wish for. Alexia, before obtaining higher education, continued her training in a master's program in education sciences. By October 2017, she was working in a bank. Alexia had a decisive character, commercial skills, and a passion for sports, especially swimming and athletics. The 2 newlyweds were active athletes, which helped them stay in shape. They preferred to run, they took care of their diet and their health. However, despite common interests and passions, after 2 years of living together, serious problems began in their relationship. Confronting disagreements, they discovered that the problems in their marriage were beginning to outweigh the moments that united them. On October 28, 2017, for Alexia, a usual Saturday morning began. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, Alexia took her devices and went for a run in a nearby woods. It was her usual workout, part of her daily routine. At that time, her husband, Jonathan, was already at the office, which he arrived at around 10:45. At work, he was in a good mood. He greeted his colleagues with a smile and began to perform his professional tasks. He was busy repairing a printer until noon. However, seeing that Alexia was not communicating, Jonathan began to worry. He tried to call her on her phone, but without success. Then he called home, but did not receive an answer. Without calming down, Jonathan contacted Gregory, Stephanie's husband and Alexia's brother-in-law. He expressed his concern about his wife's absence and silence. After that, Jonathan decided to return home, but found that everything remained the same. Alexia was not there. He called Gregory again, informing him that Alexia had not yet returned from her workout. Worried, the 2 men decided to inspect the surroundings of the place of residence. They followed Alexia's running route, hoping to find her, or at least to obtain information that would help find her. They carefully looked for any sign or clue that could indicate what had happened to Alexia during her morning run. When Alexia disappeared, Jonathan and Gregory initially thought it was an accident. During the search, Jonathan repeatedly tried to contact Alexia by phone, but without success, she did not answer, and the calls were diverted to her voicemail. They could not find her and were forced to call the emergency services. However, they could not give them information on Alexia's whereabouts. Feeling desperate, Jonathan and Gregory decided to go to the police. At the police station, Jonathan informed the officers that his wife had gone out for a run on Saturday morning, and that she had not been back since. He recounted all his efforts to find her, which unfortunately had not been successful. Under suspicion of infidelity in marriage, the focus is often on the spouse. In this case, Jonathan attracted the attention of the police. The police questioned him and examined all aspects of his marriage with Alexia. They asked questions about his daily life, his financial situation, and of particular interest to the police, the physical markings on Jonathan's body, scratches on the neck, bite marks on his hands. When Jonathan was questioned about these marks, he freely admitted that he had had an argument with Alexia the previous night. He explained that his marriage was going through a difficult time, but that after his wife's intense reaction, they had calmed down and gone to bed together. According to Jonathan, the situation seemed to have improved the following night. Alexia went to train and he went to work. Despite Jonathan's detailed narrative, the police were not completely convinced of the truth. However, the police tried to call Alexia as quickly as possible. The police advised Jonathan to stay at home and wait for calls. The girl's family, including her parents, her sister, and her husband, were concerned about her silence. All night, there was no news of Alexia. Time was passing, and after 36 hours of anguished waiting and no news on Alexia's whereabouts, her family contacted the police again. The police informed that they had searched the area, but without success. On Monday, October 30th, 2017, the family made a terrible discovery. 2 days after Alexia's disappearance, they found her. They found her in a wooded area near the village of Grella Villa. Alexia's family and friends, the locals and most notably Jonathan, were astonished by the discovery. In the days following her discovery, Jonathan made appearances in the media. He seemed very concerned about the people who knew Alexia. 2 days after the tragedy, the first results of the forensic examination were known. The investigation was extended for weeks and months. There were several versions of the incident and the alleged perpetrator. One of the hypotheses was that of Alexia's secret lover. Jonathan, the husband of the deceased, was not considered by Alexia's family as the guilty party. Jonathan had participated in all the memorial events for his wife. He always looked sad and depressed, often with tears in his eyes. He repeated that, even though he knew his wife would not return, he would feel reassured when the culprit was captured and sentenced to life imprisonment. On November 5th, Jonathan gave a speech at one of these events where he evoked his wife's hobbies and support. He said that his wife was his pillar, his oxygen, a source of strength that helped him overcome difficulties. To conclude, he expressed his pain and said that the disappearance of Alexia and Jonathan took a new turn. A neighbor of the couple informed the police that, on the night of October 27th to 28th, 2017, he saw a vehicle moving away from their house. Until that moment, the investigations had progressed very little for months. The police had not found important evidence that would help them in the investigation. The research had arrived after a close investigation. The police determined that the vehicle belonged to Jonathan and that he used it for work purposes. The tracking system confirmed that the vehicle was out of the couple's house at a key moment. The tire tracks where Alexia was found matched those of Jonathan's work vehicle. It was the decisive factor of the evidence. Jonathan asserted his innocence and denied using the work vehicle during the alleged crime. When the police received a search warrant for the house where the couple lived, their objective was to find evidence that confirmed Jonathan's guilt in his wife's death. They had decided to solve this mystery. The evidence was found in the dressing gown of the Daval spouses. It was an important discovery. Jonathan initially insisted on his innocence. He said he would never have killed his wife Alexia and claimed he did not know how her death had occurred. But after the appearance of new evidence, the pressure on him increased. The situation changed during one of the interrogations. Jonathan suggested to the officers that it was Alexia's brother-in-law, Gregory. After a brief pause, he clearly expressed his conviction that Gregory had been responsible for the incident. Jonathan also claimed that Alexia's parents and sister were aware of all this and had participated in the accusation of Jonathan as the perpetrator of the crime. In this complicated story, there was still much to discover. But one thing was clear. The truth was close. On Monday, January 29th, 2018, after the end of the afternoon interrogation, there was an unexpected turn. The researchers arrested Jonathan to begin a preliminary investigation. This event surprised everyone, his family, his community members. No one could believe that Jonathan, this fragile, sad, and often tearful man who had been desperate about Alexia's disappearance during the past months, could be the culprit of all this. The scandal was not long in coming. Soon after Jonathan's detention, he was again the center of press attention. Jonathan accused Stephanie's husband Gregory of being guilty. In addition, he declared that Alexia's parents and Stephanie knew the truth, but were hiding it. These accusations caused a great upheaval in society. In the first hearings, Jonathan firmly maintained his accusations against Gregory and other members of Alexia's family. Just a few hours after his arrest, family members accused Jonathan. The news of Alexia's murder by her own husband was quickly spread throughout the county. There were even rumors that Jonathan had confessed. On June 27, 2018, in one of the hearings, Jonathan made an unexpected confession. He was present at the time of Alexia's murder. At the heart of this judgment is the story of a woman who dreamed of having a child. But, apparently, Alexia had fertility problems. When researchers examined her phones, they found a series of angry messages in which the spouses mutually accused each other of being unable to conceive a child. The situation intensified. Alexia launched accusations against Jonathan. In one of these messages, Alexia claimed that she did not want to have children with him. For the prosecution, Jonathan's version sounded absurd, even if they did not have the presence of an accomplice. There was no evidence pointing to Gregory. However, all the evidence pointed to Jonathan as the main cause of the couple's problems. Jonathan claimed that the tragedy occurred accidentally at Alexia's parents' house when Gregory was trying to calm her during a hysterical attack. According to him, this happened on the night of October 27th to 28th of the year 2017. Jonathan insisted that Alexia's parents, her sister, and her husband should be released. In October 2018, to change their fate, Jonathan proposed an appeal to the court to be released. His main argument was that the real culprit was Gregory. This request provoked indignation among family members, who strongly opposed this development of events. But only 2 weeks later, Jonathan was released. During the preliminary hearing, Jonathan underwent several psychiatric tests. The results of the first tests were quite alarming. They indicated that Jonathan had atypical characteristics and a tendency to manipulation. Another psychiatric report revealed his aggressive character and an incredible ability to adapt to any circumstance, distorting reality according to his desires. It was an insecurity that was supposed to be related to his small stature. During many judicial hearings, Jonathan encountered contradictions in his testimonies. The events of that Thursday, November 23, 2018, were far from ordinary. It all began with a man's confession of a terrible act committed against his wife. Jonathan shared his story of the night of October 27, 2017. It was a night when, after returning to the home of his wife Alexia's parents, something happened that changed his life forever. Alexia insinuated to Jonathan that he should be intimate with her, but he refused. His refusal deeply disturbed her. She reacted aggressively to his negative, which led to unpredictable and tragic events that turned into a dramatic turning point in their relationship and in the subsequent events described in the hearing. The man described the events that led to the tragedy. He recounted that he tried to contain his wife, but she lost control, which led to a physical struggle between them. During the struggle, which lasted for some time, they discussed aggressively and they fought strongly, which led to her death. After this horrible acknowledgement, Jonathan kept silent for a moment and then continued his testimony, returning to the family conspiracy theory. The family of the deceased woman, Alexia, firmly rejected all accusations. On December 7, 2018, at the request of his parents, Jonathan was called and met with family members one by one. According to the prosecutor, in the morning, Jonathan firmly maintained his version of the family conspiracy, accusing Alexia's family of the crime. However, after several hours, he lost control and finally confessed to the crime committed against Alexia. Jonathan's lawyer told the media that in the middle of a discussion, Jonathan was overcome by rage, which led to the tragic result. The defender also indicated the intense tension in the couple's relationship, accusing Alexia of her dominant character, which made Jonathan feel humiliated and oppressed. Finally, he informed about the preparations for the trial in 2019 to demonstrate that his client was not incidental. On June 7th, 2019, a reconstruction was carried out of the events of the night, from October 27th to 28th, during which Jonathan confessed that after cutting his wife in the head, he partially burned her body. However, he also stated that during the struggle he pressed his wife's neck, which led to a fatal result. The summer of 2019, with a complex mental problem, which made him unstable and potentially dangerous. He could lose control at any moment. It was also discovered that Jonathan suffered from impotence, but its cause was exclusively related to the psyche. The expert confirmed her findings based on conversations with more than 20 people who knew Jonathan, who could not remember his behavior as a person well integrated into society without material problems. However, they claimed that his wife was the dominant one in the relationship, completely controlling all aspects of his life. On November 19, 2019, the investigation was concluded and charges were brought against Jonathan for this case. A year later, he appeared before the court. During the first hearing, in response to the judge's question, he admitted his responsibility for the crime committed. After apologizing to his families, he detailed the events of the night. In his testimony, Jonathan emphasized that taking someone by the neck, as he did with Alexia, means the intention to cause them serious harm. The courtroom remained silent. Jonathan had decided to harm his wife. During the hearing of November 20th, there was an exchange of words between him and Isabel, Alexia's mother. The atmosphere in the room became tense. During the conflict with Alexia's mother, Jonathan could not bear the pressure. He fell at her feet asking for forgiveness, but she did not say anything. Finally, on November 21st, 2020, Jonathan was arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The defense lawyer declared that the sentence would not be appealed, and Jonathan was in agreement with him. Alexia's family expressed their satisfaction with the verdict and the desire to turn the page of their life, even though they knew it would not be easy. Ashley Wadsworth, 19 years old, traveled on November 12th, 2021 from Canada to England to meet a friend she had met online. She was looking forward to finally meeting in person after many years. However, no one had expected Ashley's journey to end not in romance, but in a heartbreaking tragedy. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in a Canadian provincial town. Her parents were Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy Gendron. The large and close-knit Wadsworth family numbered more than 50 members, including relatives of varying degrees, all living in the same community. Ashley had an older sister, Hayley. The girl loved an active lifestyle, swam, rode horses, and skied. She also played tennis and loved playing the clarinet. Ashley was characterized by a cheerful, sociable, and energetic nature. These qualities made her popular among her peers and she had many friends. Ashley was also active on social media, sharing various posts with her followers. Funny photos, jokes, or simply her thoughts. In 2015, when Ashley was 12 years old, she met Jack Sapel, born on January 9th, 1999, on social media. Unlike Ashley, Jack did not have many close connections. His mother, Tracy Dalton, was married to a man named Ricky. Jack's father died in 2019 and the relationship between the two had been strained. Jack himself reportedly also did not communicate with his brother Jordan but had contact with his sister Nadia. When Ashley and Jack met, Jack was 15 years old. Jack always preferred to socialize exclusively through the internet and video games. Over time, however, he began to expand his online social circle. It was Ashley's friend who chatted with Jack, who brought the two young people together via social media. Like for many teenagers, it was natural for Ashley to chat with strangers on various platforms and form virtual friendships. This was also the case when she met Jack. Jack and Ashley quickly became virtual friends. They simply felt drawn to each other whether they had common interests or not. They began to actively chat online. Ashley did not yet have a smartphone at the time and used the family computer to access social media. Therefore, her friendship with the Englishman was never a secret to her family. As their online friendship developed, Ashley noticed some of Jack's character traits. Interestingly, many who knew Jack described him in different ways. Some said that he often struggled in school, although they remembered him as a funny, charming, and boisterous child. They also spoke of his dark side, which emerged when he was angry, acting out aggression towards himself and others. Since Ashley and Jack were both teenagers, they changed as they grew older. Furthermore, Ashley's mother reported that Jack had several relationships with different girls during their long-distance relationship, and Ashley also had typical teenage experiences. Despite periods when they didn't speak to each other, the connection between the two young people never completely disappeared, and they remained in contact over the years. As Ashley and Jack got older, their relationship evolved. They began not only to write to each other on social media, but also to make video calls, which made their relationship even more intimate and romantic. Soon, Jack became a familiar face to Ashley's family. When they saw the pair, they would greet him as if he were in their living room. He also regularly sent her gifts like teddy bears and handbags. Ashley's family and friends reported that she compared every man she met to Jack. Because of the 8-hour time difference between Vernersville and Max, where Jack lived, the young people would wake up too early and go to bed too late to be able to talk to each other. In 2018, when Ashley was 15 years old and began to show interest in meeting Jack in person, her family did not allow her to travel to another continent alone. Like any couple, the two argued from time to time. When Ashley blocked Jack on her social media accounts because of these arguments, he would create new accounts or send her messages through his sister or acquaintances. This angered and annoyed the girl's family, but she insisted that he was an approachable and sensitive person. In October 2018, Jack had Ashley's name tattooed on his arm. At that time, she was 16 years old, and he was 19. The girl's parents considered such a demonstration of love excessive and warned her to be cautious and not even to think about doing the same. Shortly thereafter, during an argument, Jack cut his tattoo of Ashley's name with a knife. After that, he became jealous and violent. He would get angry if he believed Ashley was seeing other men, even though he himself continued to date other girls. But he insisted that Ashley was his sweetheart and that he only wanted her. One day, one of Jack's girlfriends called Ashley from her home and told her that Jack wouldn't let her leave. Ashley's friend, who was with her during the call, said that Ashley seemed unfazed, as if she were accustomed to Jack's extreme behavior. Ashley merely asked him to stop acting crazy. She told her friends what had happened, but not her parents. After the frequent arguments and the last incident with the tattoo, Ashley's parents urged her to break off the relationship with Jack completely. However, she refused and downplayed the severity of his actions. In the following years, this cycle of arguments and reconciliations continued, even though concerned friends begged her to stop talking to him. Despite all the difficulties and problems in their relationship, Ashley always found the strength to forgive Jack. They had known each other since their youth, but Ashley never seemed to recognize the extent of his manipulation and psychological pressure. Since Ashley had started working part-time in fast food restaurants and department stores from a young age, she tried to save money for hobbies and entertainment. Her first major purchase was a tablet, which allowed her to browse social media more comfortably and privately. Later, she spent her savings on travel and adventures. In high school, Ashley began to take an interest in spirituality. One day, she read the Book of Mormon, which was a revelation for her. Thereupon, she decided to join a religious group, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. After graduating from Eton High School in 2020, Ashley wanted to study at Thompson Rivers University School of Law. Her dream was to become a lawyer. However, due to the pandemic and the fact that all classes were held online, Ashley decided to take a break and continue her studies at a later date. After working and earning some money in the first half of 2021 and becoming a member of the Mormon Church through the rite of baptism, the resilient and ambitious girl suddenly decided to go to the UK. She wanted to meet Jack in person to celebrate his birthday. Regardless of the objections from her family and friends, 18-year-old Ashley, who already had her own money and was of legal age, decided to go to England to be with the man she loved. On November 12, 2021, Ashley left home for the first time and arrived in the United Kingdom on a 6-month tourist visa. The long-awaited meeting with 22-year-old Jack took place the very next day. They immediately took a photo together, which Ashley posted on her social media. The tattooed Jack appeared much older than his young girlfriend. During her stay in the capital, Ashley lived in his modest apartment on the northwestern edge of the London borough of Chelsea. Since the two were living in one of the poorer areas of the city where Jack's apartment was also located, they looked together for suitable apartments in better areas of Essex for a potential future life together. Jack was exactly as Ashley had imagined him, the kind and caring man she had chatted with online for years. But in real life, he was sometimes unstable and quick-tempered, which stood in stark contrast to his usual way of communicating. Ashley, who was in the country on a tourist visa, was unable to find work and was limited in her options. Jack was also unemployed and lived on social assistance and financial support from his mother, Tracy. Ashley's photos on social media reflected her close relationship with Jack, characterized by romance and mutual affection. Ashley also kept in contact with her family via video calls, which showed that they were doing well and had no major problems, at least at first glance. Jack was initially quite calm, but then he became pensive and withdrawn. He lost interest in exploring the new city and preferred to stay at home. He spent his time playing computer games and occasionally took illegal drugs. Ashley, who usually enjoyed being outdoors, felt restricted again by her tourist visa. She increasingly adapted to Jack's preferences, spent time in solitude, and became more restless due to the cramped apartment. Before Ashley arrived to be with Jack, one of her acquaintances from the Mormon church back home decided to look out for her in advance. He introduced the 19-year-old to some American missionaries who were temporarily in Chelsea to preach around the time she was planning her visit to the UK. Ashley, who especially being so far from home wanted to befriend people who shared her faith, soon noticed that Jack's moodiness was preventing her from attending Sunday services. Therefore, she began to secretly communicate with missionary friends, but immediately deleted all messages because she knew Jack monitored her phone. Ashley soon realized that Jack was trying to control her and perhaps even emotionally pressuring her. She confessed to the missionaries that she deserved better treatment, but that Jack's happiness was the most important thing to her. And now, Jack's unpredictable behavior only made things worse. His rudeness and cruelty were much worse than just isolating Ashley from new acquaintances. Only 6 weeks before, she had been looking forward to the trip to finally meet her longtime friend, when Jack confessed to her mother that he had hit Ashley. He had suspected her of blocking 2 unknown British phone numbers years ago, believing them to be the numbers of other men. Although Ashley publicly posted on Instagram for months about how beautiful England was, she secretly documented her injuries and showed them only to her concerned older sister, Hayley. Ashley threatened Hayley that she would cut off contact with the family if she told their mother everything. Ashley had never confessed it to her own mother or her friends. But one day, Hayley accidentally revealed her secret. Understandably, her mother was stunned and very worried. She begged her daughter to come back, but Ashley insisted that Jack should first undergo complete treatment and that everything would get better after his recovery. In early January 2022, another life-altering incident occurred. Jack smashed a beer glass on Ashley's head. Horrified and sobbing, the girl contacted her sister via video call while her boyfriend made her clean up the broken glass. In the background, Ashley could see Jack pacing, yelling, and nodding. Hayley pleaded with her sister to come home, but in vain. On the 9th of that month, Jack celebrated his 23rd birthday light-heartedly with his family and Ashley. Shortly thereafter, Jack's mother and stepfather organized a family trip to a small coastal town, thinking a change of scenery would smooth things over. In the photos, everything looked so perfect that even Ashley's parents didn't realize how serious the situation was. They breathed a sigh of relief when they saw their daughter's calmness and joy. But the serenity that prevailed at that moment soon disappeared. During an argument in late January, Jack hit Ashley again. He threw a candle and the TV remote control at her while she was on the phone with Hayley, who once again pleaded with her sister to come home. Ashley initially agreed, but soon recanted, believing that the charming man she had known for years lurked beneath this cruel exterior. Ashley prayed that treatment, time, and her love would heal him. After Jack spoke with his mother, he realized what a difficult situation he had put Ashley in by accusing her of infidelity and hitting her. Jack seemed to feel guilty, but that was not enough to prevent the final tragedy. In early February 2022, Jack again angrily accused Ashley of running away from him and going out with another man behind his back. He even demanded that she prove her loyalty by showing him her phone and social media accounts. Shortly before 8 a.m., Helen, Jack's neighbor, heard Ashley's screams through the shared wall. A few minutes later, Ashley was at her door. When Helen opened the door, she saw a crying Ashley with bloody palms. She claimed Jack had caught her looking at pictures of another man and had freaked out, verbally abused her, before hitting her and throwing her phone against the wall. Despite her fears that Jack was very violent towards Ashley, she pleaded with Helen not to call the police. Helen agreed, but asked Ashley not to return to her abusive partner and to see a doctor. Ashley refused, whereupon Helen decided to speak with Jack. He apologized for what had happened and remained calm. Around 9 a.m., Lucy's neighbor handed Jack a package that had been accidentally delivered to the wrong address. Jack was very unhappy about this, but Lucy brushed it off, knowing his unfriendly and inadequate character. Around this time, Ashley called her family using Jack's phone. By this point, her mother already knew about Jack's behavior, as Hayley could no longer bear the secrecy. Her parents quickly bought a return ticket for February 3rd. When Ashley informed Jack 2 days later of her impending departure, he agreed to accompany her to the airport. Ashley's mother advised her to go to the airport immediately if he attacked her again, and warned Jack that she would call the police if he hurt her daughter further. The conversation between Ashley and her family lasted about 3 hours. When they finally disconnected, it was 11 p.m. in Florida and about 3 a.m. in Jack's region. A few minutes later, Jack sent his mother a text message confessing that he had brutally attacked Ashley again, pushed her to the ground, and had probably broken her arm. Between 11:22 a.m. and 12:38 p.m. local UK time, Ashley sent several messages to family and friends whom she had called from Jack's phone as it was night where they were. No one responded. She also sent a text message to friends at a church in Florida, asking for help and reporting an emergency. Unfortunately, these messages were only received hours later, when nothing could be done. Between 12:38 p.m. and 12:45 p.m., Jack attacked Ashley, strangling her by the neck until she stopped breathing. Then he went to the kitchen, grabbed an 11-centimeter-long knife, and stabbed her body about 100 times. After ending his girlfriend's life in such a brutal manner, Jack returned to his daily routine. Later, he changed his profile picture to a picture of himself and Ashley with the caption, "Always mine." Then he recorded a video for Haley saying he loved Ashley, was very sorry, but couldn't let her go, and that his mind and consciousness weren't working properly. The horrific video of the girl lying next to him was never widely circulated. In England, Ashley's relatives in Verona were awakened by a flood of disturbing emails, seemingly from Ashley herself. Worried, they called Jamie Ashworth, one of her Mormon friends who lived in Chelmsford. Jamie and Tyler Burden, one of the men from the church, rushed to Jack's apartment and began to knock on the door to get a response. When they received no answer, they had to leave the apartment and called the police. At the same time, Ashley's friend Verona noticed that her social media activity had resumed and her account was active. Desperate and hoping to get information from her friend, she sent Ashley a message. The reply came from Jack, pretending to be Ashley. He had invented a story that she needed help passing a COVID test and had therefore sent these messages. Ashley's friends and family kept writing to him, but Jack ignored their increasingly desperate pleas. Finally, Jack contacted his sister Nadia, confessed to Ashley's murder, and even showed her the house. At 4:13 p.m., authorities entered the house after receiving Jamie's urgent message. It took them only 10 minutes to arrive at the crime scene, but they could no longer help Ashley. The officers immediately arrested a blood-covered Jack, who confessed to his crime. He added that he suffered from severe psychosis. He was taken to the Chelmsford Correctional Facility and a trial was scheduled for September 7th, 2022 at Chelmsford Crown Court. Comprehensive toxicology tests showed low traces of illegal substances and anti-anxiety medication, and a thorough psychiatric evaluation revealed that Jack was mentally fit to stand trial. The evidence was overwhelming, including video footage of his voluntary confession. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, Jack immediately pleaded guilty, prompting the judge to impose the only sentence for such a monstrous crime: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. During the hearing on September 7th, presided over by Judge Edward Murray, the prosecution, represented by prosecutor Simon Spence, scrutinized Jack's extensive and deeply troubling criminal record. Since 2014, Jack had an extensive criminal record that included repeated arrests for harassment of his girlfriend, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and assault. He had also repeatedly obtained restraining orders against his girlfriend and her mother over the years. Ashley's grieving parents were horrified when they learned about the cruel past of the man who had taken their daughter's life. During the grueling trial, the prosecution and defense tensely debated the sincerity of Jack's allegedly remorseful letters to Ashley's family, which he had written from behind bars. After careful consideration, the presiding judge, Edward Murray, authorized the full release of Jack's letter to the media in line with the legitimate principles of judicial transparency and public knowledge. In the letter, addressed to Ashley's mother and sister Haley, Jack stated that no expression of regret or apology could bring Ashley back or alleviate their deep pain over their shocking loss. He regretted his actions and claimed that they already knew about his long-standing mental illness, as he had spoken openly about his problems in previous conversations with Ashley. He also said that his debilitating condition had rapidly worsened in recent months, which, while not excusing his abhorrent behavior, meant the intrusive thoughts had severely impaired his judgment and decision-making abilities. Given the overwhelming list of Jack's prior violent acts presented by the prosecution and his guilty plea for this heinous crime, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, with parole eligibility after a minimum of 23 years. In September 2017, the police were alerted to a strange smell and smoke rising from the backyard of a house in a London suburb. When officers arrived, they discovered charred human remains in a slow cooker. They were the mortal remains of Sophie Lyonnais, who had come to London to work as a nanny for an English family. The police were shocked to learn how that family had treated their children's caregiver. Sophie Lyonnais, a young woman with a difficult fate, was always reserved and modest. She often avoided large gatherings and disliked talking much. For this reason, Sophie had few friends, and communication with her family was often strained. Her mother, both fearful and hopeful, frequently tried to start a conversation, asking how her daughter's day had gone. Sophie's answers, however, were always brief, and sometimes reduced to a single word. That made her appear still more withdrawn. Her tendency to isolate herself had roots in childhood. Her parents' divorce in 1996, when she was still very young, left a deep mark. She no longer had a full household. Her mother remarried after the divorce, and Sophie now had a younger brother and an older half-sister. They lived in the countryside east of Paris. These family circumstances contributed to her social difficulties. There were moments, though, when Sophie opened up, speaking about her interests and feelings, even if such moments were rare. She was especially sociable with children and loved being around them. She always connected easily with kids. Nothing made her happier. That was her favorite activity. After finishing secondary school, she began studying early childhood education, hoping to build a career in that field. Yet work proved hard to find. Sophie could not secure a suitable position with children, which was a great disappointment. While she kept searching for the job of her dreams, she took a cashier post in a supermarket to support her family financially. She viewed that work as temporary while she continued looking for something better with children. Just as she was losing hope, a notice appeared that seemed perfect. A friend told her about a family in London, Sabrina Kouida and Wissem Medouni, who were seeking a French-speaking nanny for their two children, a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. It was the opportunity Sophie had long awaited. Sophie's mother first opposed her move to London, fearing it was dangerous to go so far, to a foreign country and unknown people. But Sophie persisted, and at last her parents agreed to let her go. In January 2016, at 20 years of age, Sophie arrived in London and began a new chapter. There she met Sabrina and Wissem, a married couple who needed help with their children. Sabrina worked in fashion and was a well-known makeup artist, whereas Wissem was a financial analyst at a bank. They wanted a nanny, ideal for Sophie, who wished to improve her English and work with kids. When Sabrina and Wissem started the nanny search, he had already left the bank. He had invested his savings in buying 2 apartments to rent out. The family lived in an affluent London neighborhood and was financially comfortable. Their neighbors noted Sophie's exceptional dedication to her work. They observed she hardly had a social life, unlike other nannies who often met up in their free time or took excursion days with children. Sophie was always busy and had little time to socialize. Through her first months in London and all of 2016, she felt happy and fulfilled in the household. She felt part of the family and experienced joy in her duties. But in May 2017, everything changed dramatically. Sophie wrote to her mother expressing dissatisfaction with her working conditions. She reported having been accused of theft, her pay cut, her vacation opportunities restricted, and her freedom limited. It was a dramatic swing from a wonderful life to serious problems. Sophie's mother then bought a plane ticket for her to return to France. Yet Sophie never used the ticket, and her plans to go back never materialized. In the last months before September 2017, Sophie Lyonnais became less sociable. Previously, she had kept active contact with her family, sending postcards, letters, emails. But her messages arrived less and less often, worrying her parents. This behavioral change contrasted sharply with her earlier activity and alarmed relatives and friends. On Wednesday, the 20th of September 2017, a barbecue was being prepared in the rear garden of Sabrina and Wissem's house, where Sophie worked. A conspicuous problem arose because of an unusual smell and excessive smoke from the garden. Some neighbors concerned knocked to learn what was happening. Wissem, home alone, explained he was cooking chicken and lamb and there was no need for concern. He often produced much smoke when barbecuing because he lacked experience. One neighbor nonetheless found the explanation suspicious and called the fire service, fearing the blaze could spread to nearby houses or that the smoke might be toxic. When firefighters arrived, they questioned Wissem. They found it odd that so much smoke came from grilling chicken and lamb. Inspecting the grill, they uncovered suspicious remains. One photo showed roast chicken. On closer look, however, they saw human fingers and what appeared to be a nose. They called the police. Wissem was arrested and taken to the station. As he was moved, a large contingent of law enforcement officers arrived, blocking the street and alarming residents. Police retrieved from the garden a shape like a human silhouette covered with a tarpaulin. A few days later, it was identified as Sophie Lyonnais, age 21. During the inquiry, both Wissem and Sabrina were detained. Investigators learned that for months, Sophie had been living in deplorable conditions in the couple's home. An autopsy sought to determine Sophie's cause of death and the exact timing. From the outset, crime was suspected, and the evidence confirmed it. Establishing the precise cause of death proved impossible because the remains were badly damaged by fire, and the exact moment was unclear. The case thus posed a complex mystery. 2 days after the discovery, autopsy results led to charges against Sabrina and her husband Wissem for Sophie Lyonnais' death. Evidence indicated both were involved. The court now had to uncover all circumstances to proceed to trial and secure justice for Sophie. The trial revealed details of Sophie's last months in London. Special attention fell on Sabrina's background. Like Sophie, Sabrina had begun as a nanny. She later took up makeup artistry, worked with stars, met many celebrities, and eventually made a name in fashion. During her career, she met Mark Walton, then a member of a popular boy band. Their relationship developed quickly, and the couple soon had a child. That child became the first youngster in Sophie's care. By 2013, the relationship between Sabrina and Mark ended. Mark told her he did not wish to continue. The breakup affected Sabrina deeply, altering her personality. Those who had known her earlier noticed unstable behavior, strange fits of anger, and senseless aggression. During that period, Sabrina grew obsessively interested in Mark, tracking his schedule, phoning him repeatedly, trying to stay in touch, but Mark rejected her. Meanwhile, Sabrina began a relationship with Wissem, an old acquaintance. A few months into the romance, Sabrina became pregnant. She moved in with Wisam and they had a daughter. That marked a new phase, also affecting Sophie, who now nannied the newborn. When the girl grew older, Sabrina and Wisam decided they needed help, prompting the search that brought Sophie. At first glance, Sabrina and Wisam seemed the perfect couple, yet their life hid deep problems. Wisam, a bank financial analyst, chose to resign because Sabrina wanted them to spend more time together, arguing his job consumed hours that could go to family. His departure, however, created unforeseen money troubles. The drop in income meant Sabrina could not sustain the lavish lifestyle she desired: social events, expensive outfits. Though her husband owned extra properties and savings, and though Sabrina earned enough for comfort, her wants went unmet, breeding new strains. Moreover, Sabrina remained preoccupied with her ex, Mark Walton, for many years. She went so far as to accuse him of child exploitation and abuse, painting him negatively, yet those claims had no basis and were deemed false. When Sabrina learned that Mark planned to leave London in 2017 for the United States, she was shocked and enraged. She lost the chance to shadow him as she had for years. The transatlantic distance made her prior stalking and calls impossible, leaving her unable to track him. In response to that impotence, Sabrina began venting her anger on Sophie. At first, she accused the young woman of petty theft, incomplete tasks, poorly cooked meals, tardiness in readying the children for school, any pretext to scold and shout. The situation soon worsened as Sabrina's verbal assaults turned into physical violence. It emerged that not only she, but also Wisam had repeatedly used force against Sophie. These actions caused Sophie severe suffering and harmed her overall state. The court presented shocking proof. Recordings on Sabrina's and Wisam's mobile devices were key. One could clearly hear them humiliating Sophie verbally and abusing her physically. Both resorted regularly to violence, leaving deep physical and emotional wounds. Alongside the audio, investigators found photographs on the family's computers and phones showing Sophie's gradual change. The once slender girl had become markedly thinner and gaunt. In the last photo shown, Sophie looked exceptionally emaciated, revealing her deteriorated physical and mental state. Verbal attacks became physical, worsening matters. Sophie also endured food deprivation. Hygiene was forbidden, and even her salary was cut. Witnesses who saw her in the final months noted she wore the same clothes, appeared unkempt, and failed to meet basic hygienic standards. This resulted from Sabrina and Wisam virtually denying her any normal life. Sophie's free time was cut to the minimum. She was practically confined, leaving only for child-related errands and shopping. Afterward, she was fully isolated from the outside world. Sabrina even forbade her to contact family, heightening her loneliness and pain. When Sophie's mother saw a photo of her daughter after so many months, she could not help thinking Sophie resembled people who had survived the horrors of concentration camps. Sophie had endured incredible trials, yet stayed silent out of fear. According to her mother, Sabrina repeatedly threatened Sophie, promising to send her to prison, harm her parents, and more. Sabrina even claimed Sophie had a secret relationship with Mark Walton. She alleged Sophie let Mark into the house when others were absent. Sabrina was so fixated on hurting her ex that she forced Sophie to write a letter confessing a secret liaison with Mark, stating he promised Sophie film and TV roles in exchange for intimacy. But the tale was impossible. Mark Walton did not even know Sophie existed and had moved from London only months after her arrival, making Sabrina's accusations absurd. Investigators could not pinpoint exactly when Sophie died, but trial findings narrowed the window. The prosecution believed the tragedy occurred on the night of the 19th of September. On the 20th of September, when the body was found, CCTV footage showed Wisam taking the children to school in the morning and later Sabrina bringing them to a playground, seemingly delaying their return home. Cameras also captured Wiesem going into a grocery store, a task formerly handled by Sophie. These details led prosecutors to conclude that by then Sophie was already dead. Facts of the case suggested possible premeditated murder. Sabrina exchanged messages with a friend who asked whether Sophie had acquaintances interested in nannying, cooking, cleaning, and spending time with her daughter. Sabrina replied Sophie no longer worked there, and her words hinted at an unpleasant end to their collaboration. That exchange occurred on the 15th of September, 5 days before Wissem's arrest. In their statements, they blamed each other, adding further mystery. Sabrina offered her version of the night of the 19th of September. She had gone to sleep after Wiesem and Sophie argued. He was unhappy with how dinner was prepared. Sabrina said she heard nothing more until waking in the night to strange noises from the bathroom, where she claimed she found Wiesem drowning Sophie. By the time she entered, Sophie was near death, and Sabrina was afraid to help. Wiesem, for his part, presented another version accusing Sabrina of starting the fight and attempting to drown Sophie. Thus, each told a similar story while blaming the other. During the investigation, a major twist occurred. The eldest child in the house, the son of Sabrina and Mark Walton, testified. He recounted hearing his parents arguing with Sophie that night. Then he said, Sabrina and Wiesem led Sophie to the bathroom where he heard the young woman screaming for help. This testimony allowed investigators to establish that Sophie's murder occurred on the 19th of September, implicating both adults. As noted earlier, though neither may have planned it, Sabrina had contemplated such an outcome, even telling friends beforehand that Sophie no longer worked there. After a painstaking review of all testimony, audio recordings and the timeline, the case went to the jury. After 30 minutes of deliberation, they delivered their verdict. Sabrina Quida and Wiesem Medouni were found guilty of murdering Sophie Lyonnais and sentenced to 30 years in prison. The case drew wide attention, especially after Sabrina wrote a farewell letter in Sophie's name, expressing hope that Sophie would find peace in a better world. Friends, relatives, and acquaintances of Sophie regarded this act as mockery and a complete lack of remorse. As for the two children, information about who assumed their guardianship was not disclosed, or at least no data could be found, likely a deliberate choice to shield the minors from excessive public scrutiny. In any event, we all hope they are now in safe and loving hands, surrounded by care and support, especially considering they repeatedly witnessed abuse by their mother and stepfather. That is a harsh ordeal for any child, and we sincerely wish them tranquility and happiness. In 1991, a woman named Pearl Bruns disappeared, and no one could discover what had happened to her. For 6 months, she was searched for throughout England. The police were not sure if she had fled from home or if she had been the victim of a crime. However, a year later, the investigators found a lead that was right under their noses. The story we want to tell today takes place in Maine, in the city of Portland, known for its maritime port in Casco Bay, which is located in the Atlantic. This geographical situation made Portland an important center for fishermen, attracting many workers and entrepreneurs. One of them was Pearl Smith, who worked in the city as a worker in a fish cannery. Her job consisted of preparing fish preserves for shipping to different places in the country. This work was physically demanding and poorly paid. After work, Pearl worked in a bar near the bay where she became a regular customer, like Bill Bruns. Bill was 13 years older than Pearl and worked as a truck driver. He transported fish from Maine to Montreal. Pearl and Bill had a lot in common. They enjoyed drinking and had both had personal mistakes. Pearl had already been married and divorced 5 times, and Bill had just finished his 3rd marriage. Despite this, they had fallen in love and decided to get married. On August 13th, 1991, an event took place that radically changed Pearl's family's life. The day began with an unexpected call from Elaine, Pearl's daughter from her first marriage, to the police. Elaine reported her mother as missing. This was unusual because Pearl had not attended an important family gathering, which Elaine had been looking forward to participating in. This behavior was very atypical for Pearl, who had always shown love and affection for her family. If Pearl changed plans, she would inform her daughter, but this time, there had been no communication. Elaine became alarmed immediately and began to have suspicions. Detective Linda Barker from South Portland was assigned to investigate the mysterious case. After a visit to the family's house, she noted that Pearl's personal belongings, clothes, and jewelry had not been stolen or lost, which made an attack or theft unlikely. What most attracted attention was that her most precious possession, a black Cadillac with the Pillar B mark, was in the garage. Pearl adored her Cadillac and drove it almost always. That's why her daughter Elaine became suspicious when she discovered that her mother had left the house and left the vehicle in the garage. This was unusual for Elaine, because Pearl was always behind the wheel of her Cadillac when she went anywhere. Bill Bruns, Pearl's husband, told the police that they had had an argument on the day of her disappearance. He had left the house to buy Chinese food, and when he returned, she had disappeared. He indicated that he had not worried immediately because sometimes Pearl left the house without explanation. The police also discovered that it was common for Pearl to be away from home for days. Often she stayed with friends or family, sometimes for 2 or 3 days, sometimes even for a week. The fact that she had left her car at home, however, raised questions. How could she have left without taking the car? The police conducted investigations, contacted airlines, bus companies and taxis, but found no evidence that Pearl had left the city. Finally, Bill Bruns suggested to the police that his wife might have fled with another man. This theory was also supported by the police chief, who saw it as a possible explanation for Pearl's disappearance. Days and weeks passed, and Pearl Bruns's family worried more and more about the possibility that she was lost forever. Meanwhile, in Portland, the police began the intensive search for Pearl Bruns, 48 years old. Since Pearl's spouse had not immediately reported her as missing, the police's suspicions fell on him, as it was revealed that the couple had often had conflicts attributable to Pearl's alcohol dependency. This was well known among the people in her entourage. The case took an unexpected turn when Sheriff Schwartz shared his thoughts with journalist Christina Young. He said that Pearl was an alcoholic, that she had been married 6 or 7 times, and that it was very likely that she had run away with one of her ex-husbands. Schwartz was skeptical about Pearl's disappearance and believed that she might have left with another man. He knew Bill, Pearl's current husband, well, and considered him a man incapable of doing anything wrong. And even when journalists questioned Pearl's spouse, Schwartz always answered, "No, I've known him for 20 years. He couldn't have done that." Bill Bruns' behavior in this situation was very unusual. Imagine that someone comes home and discovers that their spouse has disappeared without explanation. A normal person would immediately report the disappearance to the police, but Bill Bruns did nothing. Pearl's daughter from her first marriage went to the police. Shortly after, Pearl's bag was found partially packed in her bed. The bag had traces of blood. The police hoped that these traces might come from an object sent to a person or from a struggle where someone had been cut with a weapon. Elaine, Pearl's daughter, also expressed the suspicion that her mother was probably not alive. She declared that her mother was the type of person who would do anything to get in touch with her family if she were alive. Immediately after being informed by the media that Pearl Bruns had disappeared, the police received numerous testimonies. One of Pearl's friends informed that he had seen her late at night on the bridge. In the investigation, the police also discovered that Pearl had visited her favorite bar in the days before her disappearance. There she had met friends and told them about her frequent disputes with Bill, which generally concerned financial problems, as well as her depressed state of mind. But none of the information the police received led to advances in the investigation, and the case became bogged down. This changed 6 weeks later, when a hiker found a bag on a narrow trail in New Hampshire, about 320 kilometers away, which belonged to Pearl Bruns. In the bag there were personal documents, jewelry, cosmetics, and money belonging to the woman. Elaine, Pearl's daughter, confirmed that all the objects found indeed belonged to her mother. Detective Barker visited Bill Bruns' house again to interrogate him. Upon entering the house, she immediately noticed a carpet that seemed new. She asked Bill where the carpet came from. The man replied that it was an old carpet that he had finished washing and vacuuming. Linda, the detective, was surprised to see that the carpet looked new. When questioning the neighbors, the police discovered that they had seen Bill bring a carpet cleaning machine to the house. This contradiction between Bill's statements and the neighbors' observations made the detective even more suspicious. Why had he lied about cleaning the carpet? The police searched the house but found nothing suspicious. However, the case was now a possible homicide. The officers noted that a woman's bag was in a remarkable location and contained personal objects, documents, jewelry, and money. The outside of the bag had signs of blood. The police hoped that the bag had been left deliberately to be found. A few days later, Pearl's daughter Elaine approached Bill to tell him her suspicions. She told him, "Bill, you were the last person to see my mother. You must know what happened to her." Bill remained silent. He remained seated, looking without saying a word. In the search for Pearl Bruns, who had disappeared several months earlier, the investigators found a key piece of evidence. Her bag, found on a trail 320 kilometers from her house in New Hampshire. This discovery reinforced the investigators' belief that probably something irreparable had happened to Pearl Bruns. They had decided to study the circumstances of her disappearance and the identity of the person involved in the crime. However, the search was complicated by the duration and complexity of the case. At one point, the investigators admitted that they might have made a mistake. During the search, the police used dogs trained with a special chemical formula that mimics the smell of decomposing bodies, what is called pseudo-human odor. While inspecting the Bruns family's house, Dr. Edward David brought his dog Ray, who examined the entire house. Finally, the dog stopped in the basement, at the entrance to the basement, and lay down, indicating the presence of a sought-after odor. The investigators immediately began digging in the specific location, hoping to find evidence of Pearl's disappearance. But to everyone's surprise, there was no trace. Despite a clear signal from the service dog, the excavation of the basement yielded no results. This was a hard blow for the investigators because they were sure they had finally found the answers to their questions. Around this time, the hypothesis appeared that Pearl had not disappeared by chance. It was said that her body might have been carried to the sea or left along the road that her husband, Bill Bruns, regularly traveled, transporting from Maine to Canada. This assumption seemed logical, considering that he often interacted with fishermen at the port, and that he could easily throw her body into the ocean with the help of a boat. Some police officers believed that Bill had everything he needed to conceal a body. In his truck, there was a refrigerator where the body could have been hidden among the fish. They thought that in this environment, the body and other evidence would easily be lost among the usual traces of work. At the same time, Bill persisted in his version of the facts, claiming that Pearl had left with her ex-husband. But this version remained doubtful after a friend of Pearl's, Diana Tseer, told him about a troubling conversation with her. Before disappearing, Pearl had told Diana, "If something happens to me, know that it was Bill." These words, Diana had not been able to understand for a long time. But after Pearl's disappearance, they acquired a new and troubling meaning. The police obtained another search warrant for the Bruns house, this time with a new tool in their arsenal, the use of the chemical reagent luminol. Luminol is known for its ability to shine or fluoresce in places where blood has been cleaned with water or detergents. When the police applied it in the Bruns house, a terrifying image was revealed. The blood traces on the walls and on the floor became visible, as if in an instant, a terrible secret had come to life. These traces undeniably indicated that a significant amount of blood had been spilled and then carefully cleaned in the house. This directly contradicted Bill Brunn's claims that his wife had simply disappeared. The red-colored traces extended toward the bathroom. In the bedroom and on the linoleum, one could see places where blood had been spilled and then carefully cleaned. The stairs that led to the bathroom also showed signs. Each stair seemed to testify that an object had been dragged, leaving traces behind. At the foot of the stairs, they found a large red-colored trace. However, the most troubling element for the police was a red-colored trace in the soft soil of the basement, measuring 12 meters by 8 meters. There, on the dirt floor, they found a clear mark that corresponded to the shape of a human body, Pearl Brunn's size. Detective Harriman, presenting Bill Bruns with the evidence obtained with luminol, asked him, "What do you think, Bill? Who do you suspect in this case? Who do you think could be involved in what happened?" Bill replied impassively, "I have suspicions about the wife." The police encountered a dead end in the investigation of Pearl Brunn's disappearance. Even after 3 searches and preliminary excavations in the soft soil of the Bruns house basement, no important evidence had been found. The situation was complicated by the fact that the main suspect continued to insist on his innocence and refused to submit to the lie detector test. In addition, previous attempts to excavate the basement floor had not resulted in the discovery of any evidence whatsoever. For the next 9 months, the investigation made no progress. The police were convinced that the key to solving Pearl's disappearance was precisely in this basement. An officer admitted that they couldn't help thinking that there might be evidence hidden in the basement, but the idea of excavating all the soil manually seemed impossible. That's when Detective Harriman turned to the ultimate forensic tool, ground-penetrating radar. This device, used to detect large metallic objects under the earth, works through sending high-frequency radio waves that reflect back when there are obstacles. The detective contacted a local engineering and ecology firm that had the necessary equipment. 3 months after Pearl Brunn's disappearance, her house's basement was inspected in detail using ground-penetrating radar, hoping that this would help unveil the key aspects of this complicated case. As is known, most of the time, the human being is composed of water, fat cells, muscle tissue, and bones. It is precisely this unique combination that created difficulties in the searches. Geophysicist Scott Calkin shared that there was a problem in this specific study. The human body does not allow the efficient passage of radio wave energy. An interesting case occurred in the basement of the Bruns family house. Using radar, the researchers discovered something that caused a constant reflection of waves at a depth of 1 meter underground. Initial excavations showed the presence of oxidized clay of an unusual red color. However, in a specific location, the reflection of radio waves was not observed. The radar showed a white spot where, as the researchers supposed, something was absorbing the radio wave energy. What was there remained a mystery until the excavations continued, and they discovered with their own eyes. Like an ordinary evening, Bill Bruns returned home around 6 o'clock in the morning. He sat in the kitchen to dine while taking care of his domestic affairs. At the same time, the researchers resumed their excavation work in his basement. At a depth of about 60 centimeters underground, the researchers discovered something unusual. It was a sealed polyethylene bag. Upon opening it, they found what left them in shock. It was a head. The researchers' work continued, and soon they made another horrible discovery. It was a human body, meticulously wrapped in 2 large garbage bags, tied with rope and adhesive tape. On the body, there was a belt buckle with Pearl's name engraved and pink shoelaces on the shoes, the same ones Pearl wore the last time they had seen her. The smell of decomposition was so strong that it suffocated all those present. The police prepared to meet Bill Bruns for the last time. When the officers entered and announced that he was arrested for his wife's murder, Bill, remaining calm, objected and replied that murder was a serious enough accusation and affirmed that he had not killed anyone and that they had no evidence. Then the police officer announced the discovery of the body in the basement, and after that, Bill, astonished, confessed everything. Bill Bruns was arrested and accused of a terrible crime: murder. According to the police, on August 11th, there was a dispute between him and Pearl, caused by financial disagreements. The dispute turned into a physical struggle. Bruns killed Pearl, and the evidence from that evening remained throughout his house, in her bag, on the walls, and on the floor. The bodily injuries suffered by Pearl were fatal. X-ray analysis revealed 3 fractures on the left side of her face. The examination of the body also showed the absence of wounds from sharp objects, which indicates that the cause of death was receiving serious injuries incompatible with life. After the crime, Bruns hid Pearl's body, wrapping it in polyethylene bags and taking it to the basement. The traces he had left on the floor allowed following the path by which he dragged the body to bury it. A police service dog correctly identified the position of the body in the basement, even though the actual burial site was only a few meters from the one indicated by the dog. Trying to mislead the investigation, Bruns took Pearl's bag and left it on a tourist trail in New Hampshire, 320 kilometers from the crime scene. When the police discovered and unearthed Pearl's body, the unpleasant smell spread over a great distance. At that moment, Bill was at his house, quietly having lunch with spaghetti. When the police arrived to arrest him, he was even able to ask, "Can I finish lunch before being taken away?" Ironically, during the examination of Pearl's body, the pathologist determined that she was in the final stage of cancer and had no more than 6 months to live. If Bill Bruns had not killed my mother, she would have died naturally, and he would not have been in prison. I simply see how she laughs at him for the last time because, as I said, if he had not killed her, she would have died alone, said Pearl's daughter. In the end, Bill pleaded guilty to an unpremeditated crime and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. After the examination, the investigators said that without the contribution of forensic science, such as ground-penetrating radar, which was used successfully in this case, they probably consider that Bill Bruns could have avoided punishment for the crime committed.